Jonathan Godfrey with Onsite Wastewater Professionals. And today I'm joined with Trish Angoli, an engineer with the Onsite Wastewater branch in Raleigh. And Trish, we're talking setbacks today. Thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure, Jonathan. I always love to talk about 18E.
Very good. So setbacks, we got big changes or small changes, big impacts. Which is it?
Big changes.
Big changes.
Big
Okay.
changes. One of the biggest that I think we did is where previously we had said that the setback, if you had any part of the system installed in saprolite to a well, was 100 feet. We've now reduced that to 50 feet. We went and talked with Aziz, actually Scott Green went and talked with Aziz and Mike Verpraskis, who did some of the original research.
Right.
And based on that original research, we felt very comfortable reducing that 100 to 50 feet. So now Wilson in the private well rules, Wilson and John, they still have the 100-foot setback, but they can do a variance.
They can.
They can reduce. Yeah, they can reduce it to 50.
They can. And I talked to Wilson about this, and Wilson indicated that he was going to be giving some variances out. It was going to be liberal with the variances when it comes to saprolite. I think the statement was it'll be like giving out candy on Halloween. Gonna be often and done with a smile. So, and even maybe some expedited format where there could be a pre-populated variance application online for saprolite, situations. That's going to be a big impact, Trish, as you go in the Western Piedmont, the western part of the state. That is a lot more land available for on-site wastewater solutions.
It is. That was a big one that was important to us to investigate. So we are really pleased that we were able to do that. Another one that I'm kind of proud of is we've got the terminology in the setback rule now to match terminology in other rules, not necessarily in 18E, but going back to private wells, public water supply, because before some of our terminology didn't match up when you looked at other rules. And so it was like, well, what exactly do we mean by this?
Give me an example of that, Trish.
Currently in 1900, the way we had it phrased for basically what would be a private water supply well. Okay, that terminology there, that phrase that we used, that wasn't in any of the private drinking water well laws or rules. That wasn't in anything with public water supply. So then when the question would come up, it's hard to define a term that has no definition.
Right. There was also, it looks like, an effort to do that when it comes to bodies of surface water and how we define now where we're establishing our setback from. Where we used to have a normal pool elevation, we've got a slight tweak in the way we define that, and I assume that was meant to create uniformity.
Correct.
In how that was defined between different sets of rules.
Correct. So we, with this rule, as with everything in 18E, but certainly with this rule, we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that our language matched up what was in rules and DEQ, laws and DEQ, so that everybody's treating them the same, because it has never done us any good if our rules go one path and then DEQ's rules go a whole different path.
Right.
One of the big, again, something else that's really big is the water and sewer line separations that we have, because ours have always been, you have to have 10 feet horizontal setback. And so we have now modified that, and it lines up with what public water supply does.
With public water supply. And so now there's no intellectual disconnect where a sewer and a water line, if it's under a different jurisdiction, can be much closer than 10 feet. So now we've brought ourselves in line. But once again, there was a nod to either other regulatory groups or to science. And there's something to be proud of there with the saprolite stuff. We didn't just make a change to make a change. There was some understanding of the science behind it first.
Correct. And that's, that was one of our key things. And Scott reached out and talked to, like I said, Aziz and Mike Verpraskis. And we'd also looked at, there was something else with saprolite. I'm trying to remember now, but we looked at a couple different things with it. But the horizontal setback, based on that original research, not new research, but that original research, that one we felt very comfortable with. We felt like we could make that change and there was no greater risk to public health. And we felt that would be huge because, again, on some of these lots, it opens some of these lots up.
It's going to have a big impact. And so the development community can't be too upset about that one. That's a big chunk of land put back.
I don't think so. We've also tried to add a few things where now you can even make some reductions in setbacks if you do leak testing of tanks. So we tried really hard to try to give the private sector what they were asking for with
while
some
still
options.
Yeah, while still protecting public health, right?
Correct.
And so the private sector, though, there was some updates that had to be made. So the setbacks in 83 or 77, we probably weren't thinking about geothermal wells in the way that we have to think about those today. And
so geothermal wells, that was a whole big issue. That actually, we had a whole separate meeting about setbacks that came out from the task force meetings. And the geothermal wells was a big issue. And so we had someone from DEQ there to kind of help parse through the geothermal wells. And when you do have to take a setback, when you don't, because in some situations, the way they're done, and I can't remember now because it's been so long, and I can't remember what the gentleman's name was either, but he kind of helped us work through all of that. So, okay, this is what we have to have here. This is what we should have here. And we also worked with everyone to come up with the reduced setbacks. If you do leak testing, we added reductions with, what is it? It's wells and setbacks, I believe, not wells and setbacks. I think it is. It's one of the things that we added because I was looking at this earlier, and of course it's gone straight out of my brain.
Increase or a benefit to water testing tanks around detention ponds.
But it's also collection sewers. We did a lot more with collection sewers and the setbacks. And we allowed kind of like a stage setback based on the material, whether or not you did leak testing. And again, to provide people with options, because sometimes 5 to 10 feet is all you need.
It's huge. And you go into Eastern North Carolina, and those setback reductions are going to be very, very impactful to the development community. And to make sure everybody understands it, you're talking collection sewers. The definition of collection sewer was frankly expanded a little bit in my view. And so it made it clear that we're talking pressure supply lines for pump lines, but we're also talking about gravity supply lines, both to D boxes and from D boxes to trenches.
Yes.
Are categories. And even the actual distribution vise itself may have some ability, if proven watertight, to get some increased or decreased setbacks out there.
Yes, we tried. We heard what people said, so we really tried to give options to people to be able to reduce setbacks, and especially on tiny lots, to maybe be able to get a system on there. It's you're just gonna have a few extra bells and whistles that you have to deal with, but if you're willing to do that, it could work for you.
And so as an observer of the process and the task force and things like that, it was neat to see you had the regulators involved, and you had Environmental Health Supervisor Association representation, you had the branch representation, but you also had installers at the table and people in the development community. And so you guys were able to balance these increased or these reductions in setbacks with public health by saying, yes, you can get this increase, but you're going to have to do something to prove water tightness. You're going to have to do something to show that we're protecting the environment and not degrading our ability to do our job,
Correct.
just for the sake of these setbacks.
Correct. It was a give and a take. If you want this, okay, we can give it to you, but then you've got to prove to us that we don't have to worry about leaks or other things which could be of an issue. And so it, I think especially at the coast, which has the tiniest lots, I think that's probably where we'll see it have the greatest impact, some of these.
The idea, the dreaded water line at the Outer Banks, where there was no good solution, and you guys sat down with that group of different perspectives and came up with the idea that we may be able to get a little closer to that water line if we water test that tank. And so that was
well, and even something like this, which seems kind of silly, but one of the comments we received at one point was, how depending on where I apologize for the Swiss cheese brain. We had side slope, same slope or down slope for setbacks for drainage devices.
Right.
And a couple of installers said, when you go out to the site originally, before you do any landscaping, and you say, okay, this will be, side slope. And then all of a sudden, after they finish grading, now you're something else, now you're down slope, which requires a greater setback, I believe. They said that was a significant problem. And, or counties would just default to the greatest setback because they didn't know after the landscaping occurred what would happen. So we also looked at that one seriously and said, do we still need to have the 3 setbacks, or does it make more sense to just pick one and say, okay, we're going to move with this one moving ahead? So that was one that came out of some installers' frustrations, because it felt like through no fault of the health departments, it was a moving target.
Right.
And they couldn't meet it. So we tried really hard to listen to everybody's issues and concerns and to address what we could.
And you even, if you take, for instance, the swimming pools, we'd had one size fits all for years, right?
Yep.
If it was a above ground pool that still has some impact, but not the impact, and my family's in the pool business, so not the impact that you've got on this big excavation of an in-ground pool. You guys sought to try to separate, and I know it added a level of complexity. And there were some that picked on you, Trish, about the number of pages, right, to the rules, right? But the benefit of this now is we have a solution that could better fit the problem or the challenge, right? We can look at that lot.
We tried with setbacks, but just, overall, we tried to give more. We tried to hear what everybody was saying, public sector and private sector, and to give more instead of making everything more restrictive, because certainly you feel like in this day and age, with a lot of things and all the experience, the hundreds of years of experience from all the environmental health specialists and installers, operators, everybody that contributed, we should know a little bit more and understand what we can tweak and what we can't, and the changes that we can make that won't have an adverse impact on public health. And certainly if we were able to do that easily, we did. If we needed to put some other, okay, you need to do some other things to get to that point, we did as well.
Right.
But that was a key thing, was to try to take this to the next level.
Right. And there are situations that are they're complex just because of their nature. And I think of like our setback to a cut or an embankment of 2 feet or more. There's some complexity there that we're going to have to riddle out on each site. But once again, in the end of the day, the goal, I think, was to not solve a problem with a one size fits all solution, to solve a problem with a more targeted approach that would give a better solution to each individual lot. So
yes, and that, Jonathan, that one that you picked on, you're right. We're going to have to kind of work our way through that one. But the idea was with that, especially that, if you've got some of these setbacks, but if it turns out that the soil is good and you can actually move a little bit closer, and you're not going to have sewage breaking out on the slope, so that was all stuff. Again, that was a very long, intense conversation about that one, because of how that was being interpreted by some counties. And so we wanted to try to make sure that, although we probably made it more difficult, but that we were staying away from some of the interpretations that were really restricting the sites to the point where sometimes the consultants didn't have many options.
I think the takeaway there is that, and then for everybody to remember, the goal and the mindset was to maintain the protections for public health.
Yes.
And give where we could without sacrificing those protections for public health.
Correct.
And if that causes a little bit of complexity, at some point it's worth it. And we'll give credit to people in this industry. We can work through that. You know, we can figure out that complexity. I'm going to give folks the benefit of the doubt that understanding the purpose, understanding the goal of all this, we can get this stuff figured out. Were there any other areas of setbacks, I mean, that really stand out to you, or things that
the other big thing that we really just did was we expanded the list. You know, we tried to expand the list and include things that aren't in 1950 that have become issues or routine questions. And so that was probably the other really big thing that we did with that rule. But otherwise, I think we've hit a lot of them.
So the buried storage tanks didn't used to be in there, right?
Correct.
But now the number of times that a buried propane tank or a propane tank gets set right on top of our system and cause harm was something that you guys frankly addressed by adding another setback in there.
Utility poles, that was always a big question that we got.
Yeah, and I want to bring up utilities because that's something that we talk about, protection of public health and the environment. There's also something to be said for protecting the people who do this work, whether it be environmental health specialists out probing systems, or whether it be installers and operators out digging and working in the systems. There is a note in 18E that talks about, at least conceptually, that utilities should stay away from us. That utilities should stay 5 feet away from us. And that for the first time in our history, we kind of had something in writing to point at. I don't know that we're going to be able to like bludgeon the Duke Powers of the world with that, but it at least is something in writing that shows that people were aware of the risk that professionals in this industry take and value their personal safety in doing these jobs.
Well, and it's, you know, unfortunately, as you well know, with septic systems, you know, everybody kind of the redheaded stepchild of the redheaded stepchild. And so it felt like it was important to at least put in there and say, hey, all other utilities, you know, you need to stay away from us, or if you have a greater setback, you need to do that. And that way then, you know, because certainly with professionals in other industries, you should know what a rule is if it's going to impact you directly or indirectly. Now, how we get that out to all of them, I have no idea. But they're, you know, somebody needs to do their due diligence and say, oh, hey, wait a minute, this rule has changed. And so now we need to be aware of this. And even if it doesn't start off where we hit the right people at first, at least, like you said, it's a start. We've got it in there. And we're showing that we have just as much staying power and credibility as water, gas, electric, and all the others.
That's fantastic. And I think it shows a level of respect for everybody top to bottom in this industry, installers right on through. So I think that's great. Trish, 18E is going to be impactful. It is going to make more land available on, I don't want to be overly dramatic here, but I think it's possible it makes more land available on nearly every lot in the state. It is going to be far reaching in its impact to the development community. And I think it balances that without sacrificing public health here. Looking to the future of setbacks. Is there anything, I mean, we're going to have to learn how to digest these setbacks
Yeah.
and apply them. But anything that's on the horizon for setbacks, I know there's not really any legislation at this time that
No,
looks to,
no, I
to
haven't, I don't think the most I see is we may end up that one, the one with the cut language and all of that. I see potentially after, let's say 6 months to a year of that actually being in practice, I could see us going back and maybe tweaking that language a little bit, just so that it's especially if we've hit some snags or we've learned some benefits or some drawbacks to it. I could see us tweaking that one because I know that's a little complicated.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I haven't seen that we've missed anything with that. So I think for now we're good, but I fully anticipate over the next, I'll say 5 to 7 years, that as 18E becomes implemented and we start working our way through this, that we're going to find little things that need to be changed. So at this point, I'm wide open. I'm just excited that 18E is going to be effective, that all this work that everybody did and everybody's support will finally get to see the benefits of it. And that includes developers and homeowners and all of that, and all the cleaner language, So, and the rest, hey, job security, that's my goal.
There we go. Well, I think as an industry, we will come together and kind of make suggestions and hear concerns about what this all means when we put it in practice. And we'd be lacking if we didn't do that. Exciting to see the future. I think you are to be commended for your perseverance and your hard work in all of this. At the end of the day, the finished product was a really good blend of protection with innovation. So good job. Appreciate your service in North Carolina, Trish.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Folks, thank you guys very much. Join us again, On-Site Wastewater Professionals. Have a great day.